I tasted blood in my mouth every time my own father whispered in my brother's ear, "Hit her harder today, Arthur. Daddy wants to see her really cry." Hi, everyone. My name is Virginia, but folks just call me Grandma Ginny. I'm 69 years old and was born in a small town in Virginia called Leesburg, which was much smaller back then than it is today. If you're watching this video, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. This old lady gets so happy seeing people from all across America following along. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Sometimes I imagine my words reaching places I've never set foot in, and that warms my heart in ways I can't explain. Today I'm going to share a story I've kept locked in my chest for over 50 years. A story that many in my own family don't fully know because the pain was so great that the words refused to leave my mouth. It's about how sometimes hell has an address, a name, a last name, and sometimes lives under the same roof as you. It was 1963. I was only 8 years old, and our family lived in a wooden house in downtown Leesburg. My father, Alfred, was a merchant with a general store on Main Street, a well-respected man in town who greeted everyone, attended church every Sunday, always well-dressed, always smiling. "Mr. Alfred is a good man," people would say, if only they knew. My mother, Janet, was a beautiful woman with brown hair always tied in a low bun, large, sad eyes that I only understood the reason for years later. She took care of the house, cooked, sewed, did everything a proper wife was supposed to do back then. But there was something in the way she walked, always with her head down, always whispering, always apologizing for existing. And there was my brother Arthur, 3 years older than me. From an early age, he was different. Not in a good way. It was something that gave me chills even as a child, not fully understanding what I was seeing. Arthur would hurt birds he found in the yard, slowly pulling off their wings just to watch them try to fly. He'd break my toys and then laugh when I cried. But in front of others, he was the well-mannered boy, the exemplary son, his father's pride. Our house was large for the standards of the time. 5 rooms, a yard with apple and peach trees, a well in the back. There was even a small separate room in the back that my father called the storage room, but which I later discovered had a much more sinister purpose. The first times Arthur hurt me, I thought it was just typical older brother behavior. A pinch here, a push there, nothing that wasn't normal between siblings. Mom even justified it. "Virginia, don't provoke your brother. He's a boy, he's just different." But gradually things got strange. Arthur started calling me to play when Mom and Dad weren't around. Games that made me uncomfortable, that made me cry, that he said were our secret. "If you tell anyone, Virginia," he'd whisper in that voice that gave me nightmares, "nobody will believe you. And if by chance they do believe you, I'll say you asked to play like this." I was 8 years old. I didn't fully understand what was happening, just knew I didn't like it, that it hurt, that I felt dirty afterward. I tried telling Mom once, but the words came out jumbled, confused, and she just said it was my imagination, that Arthur was a good boy. It was on a December afternoon, Christmas Eve of 1963, that I discovered the horror in my life was much bigger than I had imagined. Dad had come home early from the store. Mom had gone to the neighbor's house for a cookie recipe, and I was in the backyard trying to pick apples when I heard voices coming from the storage room. The door was ajar. I peeked in and saw Arthur inside, playing with some ropes, arranging some cloths. There was a chair in the middle of the room, and something about that scene gave me great fear. "Arthur?" I called softly. "What are you doing there?" He turned with a smile that froze my spine. "Preparing a surprise for you, little sister. Dad's orders." At that moment, I heard my father's footsteps approaching. "Is everything ready, son?" he asked, and there was an eagerness in his voice I'd never heard before. "Yes, Dad. Can bring her in." That's when I understood. They were talking about me. What happened in that room that afternoon changed my life forever. I won't go into details because some pains are too great to be described, but I'll say enough for you to understand. My own father not only allowed Arthur to hurt me, he participated. He watched. He guided. "Hold her right, Arthur," Dad would say, sitting in a chair in the corner, his eyes gleaming with a sick light. "When she tries to scream, put the cloth in her mouth." I struggled, cried, begged them to stop, but it was as if my tears excited them even more. Arthur would hit me with an old belt that Dad kept there, and with each strike, I would hear my father breathe harder, as if he was enjoying what he saw. "You can hit harder," Dad instructed. "She can take it." When it was all over, I was on the floor of the storage room, all bruised, barely able to move. Dad stood up, adjusted his clothes, and spoke with complete naturalness. "Remember what we talked about, Virginia. This is family business. If you tell anyone, especially your mother, I'll have to tell Arthur to be even more creative with you." I dragged myself out, managed to get to my room, and stayed there until Mom came back. When she saw me all bruised up, with a split lip and a bruise on my face, she asked what had happened. "I fell from the apple tree," I lied, like Dad had taught me to lie. "My goodness, girl, you need to be more careful." If only she knew that the ones who needed to be careful were her and I. That was the first of many afternoons in the storage room. Always when Mom was out. Always when there was no one around to hear my screams. Dad even created a system. He would invent some reason for Mom to leave the house, and then he'd take me to the storage. "Today you're going to learn not to cry," he would say sometimes. "Girls who cry too much become weak women, and I'm not raising a weak daughter." Other times it was worse. "Arthur, show her who's in charge in this house. Show her properly." My brother obeyed with an enthusiasm that disgusted me. It was as if those moments were the best in his life. He invented different ways to hurt me, tested my resistance, saw how far he could go without leaving marks that Mom could see. "You like to study, don't you, Virginia?" Arthur said once while tying my hands. "So today I'm going to teach you some things they don't have in books." I would close my eyes and try to go somewhere else in my mind. I thought about school classes, about Ms. Dalva, who was so kind to me, about the books I read hidden under the blanket. I dreamed of being a doctor, of taking care of other children, of being different from them. But no matter how much I tried to escape mentally, my body was there, suffering, bleeding, coming undone little by little. The worst part was that Dad didn't do this out of anger or because he was disturbed. He did it coldly, calculatedly, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Sometimes he even smiled. "Women need to learn from an early age what their place is," he would justify to Arthur, as if giving a life lesson. "And a woman's place is always beneath a man." Arthur absorbed every word as if it were gospel. Mom began to suspect when my grades at school plummeted, when I stopped playing, when I became a quiet child who lived locked in her room. But every time she tried to talk to me, Dad would appear. "The girl is going through a difficult phase, Janet," he would say in that controlled voice. "It's normal. Leave her alone." And Mom, who was as afraid of him as I was, would bow her head and agree. I lived in that hell for 2 years. 2 years waking up every day in fear, going to sleep every day in pain. 2 years pretending at school that everything was fine, that I was a normal family, that my father was a respectable man. Until one day, when I was already 10 years old, something changed. Mom came home early, just as Dad was taking me to the storage room. She saw everything. My fear, the tears, the way Dad was forcibly holding my arm. For a second, our eyes met. And in that second, my mother finally understood. That night, for the first time in 2 years, I saw my mother cry. Not an ordinary cry, but the cry of someone who just discovered that the world they knew was a lie. She locked herself in my room with me, and for the first time, asked for the truth. "Virginia," she whispered, her hands trembling as she touched the bruises on my arm. "How long has this been happening?" I couldn't answer at first. The words got stuck in my throat, as if I was still afraid Dad might hear me through the walls. But the way Mom looked at me then, it was as if she had finally removed a blindfold from her eyes. "It's been a long time, Mom," I managed to whisper. "Since I was 8 years old." I saw her face crumble. She covered her mouth with her hands, trying to muffle a scream of despair. "My God, my little girl. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." But deep down, I think she did know. She knew and was too afraid to accept the truth. The days that followed were strange. Mom started to watch me differently, as if she was seeing scars that had always been there, but that she had chosen to ignore. She noticed how I would shrink when Dad approached, how I never stayed alone with Arthur, how I always made excuses not to be at home. "Why did you never tell me before?" she asked one afternoon while preparing lunch. "Because every time I tried, you said it was my imagination. And Dad said that if I told, it would be worse for me, and for you too." Mom stopped stirring the beans and looked at me with eyes full of tears. "He threatened you with that?" I nodded. And that's when she understood the size of the trap we were living in. Dad wasn't just a violent man, he was calculating. He knew exactly how to control us, how to keep us silent. Over the following weeks, Mom started paying attention to details that had previously gone unnoticed. How Dad always found a way for her to leave the house on Thursday afternoons. How Arthur would get excited on those days, as if waiting for something special. How I always got sick or hurt on those same afternoons. "He plans everything," she mumbled one night, while applying ointment to my back where Arthur had hit me with a broomstick. "Everything is calculated." The worst thing is that Dad didn't even try to hide it anymore. Since Mom had found out, he became even more daring, as if testing how far she would endure without doing anything. "Janet," he said one morning at breakfast, "today you're going to your sister's house in Alexandria. Stay there for 3 days. I need to sort out some things here at home." Mom looked at me, then at him. "What kind of things?" "Things that are none of your business," Dad replied, his voice heavy with threat. "You're going because I'm telling you to." At that moment, I saw something in my mother's face that I had never seen before. It wasn't fear. It wasn't submission. It was anger. A cold, contained, dangerous anger. "All right, Alfred," she said, her voice strangely calm. "I'll go." But that night, she came to my room and whispered in my ear, "I won't leave you alone with them ever again. I promise." It was from there that we began to plan our escape. Mom researched, talked to trusted people, discovered that we had distant relatives in Washington, D.C. who could take us in. She began to save money in secret, selling her jewelry, her best clothes, all without Dad knowing. "When we leave here, girl," she would say as she counted the coins, "it will be to never come back." But Dad was smart. He started to suspect our hushed conversations, the way Mom looked at him during meals. One night, he caught Mom going through the drawer where he kept the money. "What are you doing, Janet?" "Nothing, Alfred. Just organizing things." He took all the money she had saved. "Household money stays with me. It always has. Have you forgotten?" That night, I heard them arguing in the bedroom. Dad spoke softly, but the tone was threatening. Mom cried, tried to explain herself. In the end, he left, slamming the door. The next morning, Mom had a black eye. "I tripped in the dark," she lied when I asked. It was during this time that Arthur also started to become more violent with me, as if he sensed that time was running out, that he needed to take advantage while he could. The meetings in the storage room became more frequent, more brutal. "Dad says you and Mom have been making plans," Arthur whispered one afternoon, while tying my hands tighter than usual. "He says you two need to learn a lesson." That afternoon was the worst of all. Arthur used things he had never used before, hurt me in ways that left me unable to walk properly for days. And Dad watched it all, making suggestions, laughing when I screamed. "Disobedient women need to learn through pain," he would say, as if teaching a class. "And mothers who don't raise their daughters right need to see their daughters suffer the consequences." When it was over, I was almost unconscious. There was blood in places I didn't even know could bleed. Arthur left me on the floor like I was a garbage bag. "Next time your mother tries to run away," Dad said, leaning down near my ear, "it will be much worse than this." I managed to crawl to my room. Mom found me hours later, passed out on the bed with a high fever. She cleaned my wounds, gave me medicine, stayed up all night watching over me. "I can't take it anymore," she whispered, thinking I was asleep. "My God, I can't take seeing my daughter suffer like this anymore." It was that night that she made a decision. A decision that would change our lives forever. The next morning, when Dad left for the store and Arthur went to school, Mom sat on my bed with an expression I had never seen before. Pure determination. "Virginia," she said, holding my hands, "we're not going to run away anymore." My heart raced. "What do you mean, Mom? Running doesn't solve anything. They'll find us, they'll bring us back, and then it will be even worse." I felt total despair taking over me. "So we're going to have to stay here forever? We're going to have to endure this forever? Mom shook her head, and for the first time in years, I saw a smile on her face. But it wasn't a happy smile. It was a cold, dangerous smile. No, girl. We're not going to run away because we won't need to. They're the ones who are going to leave our lives. Forever. I didn't understand at the time what she meant. I only understood 3 days later, when she called me for a conversation that changed everything. Virginia, do you trust Mom? Yes. Then listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you. We're going to get rid of them. Both of them. But I need your help. That's how the boldest plan that 2 desperate women ever devised began. A plan that would either give us freedom or destroy us completely. Mom's plan was so simple, it was brilliant, and so dangerous that if it went wrong, we'd probably be dead before dawn. Virginia, she whispered, checking for the 3rd time if the door was well closed. You know your father keeps money in the safe at the store, right? I nodded. Everyone in town knew that Dad was suspicious of banks, that he preferred to keep the money at home. And you also know that he and Arthur are going to Alexandria next Friday to pick up new merchandise, right? They'll be gone all night. This was also true. Once a month, they made this trip to restock the store. They always came back Saturday morning, tired and hungover, because they took the opportunity to drink in the capital. So, daughter, Mom continued, her eyes shining with a determination that both scared me and gave me hope at the same time. It's this Friday that we're going to act. What she was planning was at once the bravest and scariest thing I had ever heard. Mom had discovered that Dad kept almost all the family's money hidden in a metal box behind the counter at the store. Money that he said was for emergencies, but that he actually used to buy our silence and our submission. We're going to take all the money, Virginia, every cent, and when they come back on Saturday, they won't find either us or anything that proves we existed. But the plan wasn't just to steal the money and run. It was much more elaborate than that. Your father is a proud man, Mom explained, while drawing the layout of the store on a piece of paper. If we simply disappear with the money, he'll know it was us. He'll look for us to the ends of the earth. Then she told me the boldest part of the plan. We were going to make it look like the store had been robbed. We would break the front door, mess everything up, scatter merchandise on the floor as if thieves had broken in and taken not only the money, but also us too. Like we were kidnapped? I asked, trying to understand. Exactly. They'll think we were taken along with the money, that we're probably dead somewhere. The coldness in her voice when she said this gave me chills. But at the same time, I understood the brilliance of the idea. If everyone thought we were dead, no one would look for us. We could start a new life somewhere else, without fear of being found. For the next 5 days, Mom planned every detail. She studied the street schedules, discreetly talked to neighbors to find out who would be home Friday night, even discovered which bus we could take to leave town without being seen. The secret, she said in one of those conversations, is to leave no loose ends. It has to seem real in every detail. Mom got a key to the store. She knew where Dad hid the spare. She planned exactly which products to scatter on the floor, which shelves to knock down, even where to leave a few drops of her own blood to make it look like there had been a struggle. Our blood? I asked, scared. Just a few drops, daughter. On the door, on the counter. To make it look like we tried to resist. The hardest part of the plan was psychological. We had to pretend normalcy during those 5 days, act as if nothing had changed, as if we were still the same submissive women as always. Dad didn't suspect anything. He continued with his cruel routine, taking me to the storage room whenever Mom went out, beating her when contradicted, treating us like his personal property. When I get back from Alexandria, he said on Thursday, I want you two to have cleaned the whole house. It's looking like a pigsty. Yes, Alfred, Mom replied, lowering her head as she always did. But this time, when he wasn't looking, she winked at me. Arthur was also excited about the trip. I'm going to buy some special things for you, little sister, he whispered in my ear at dinner time. Things that will make our meetings even more interesting. I felt like throwing up, but I just smiled and nodded. Because I knew there wouldn't be any more meetings. There wouldn't be anything else. On Friday morning, they left early. Dad kissed Mom on the cheek, that fake little kiss he gave when he went on a trip. Arthur made a point of squeezing my hand harder than necessary when saying goodbye. See you tomorrow, girls, Dad shouted from the car. Behave yourselves. We waited until the car completely disappeared down the road. Then we waited another hour, just to be sure. Then Mom looked at me and said, "Now, daughter, it's now or never." We started in the afternoon, when the street was emptier. Mom opened the store with the spare key, and we entered as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Anyone who saw would think we were just helping with something at the store. The safe was exactly where Mom had said. A heavy metal box, locked with a simple padlock. Mom knew where Dad kept the key, in an empty coffee can in the pantry. When we opened the box, I couldn't believe what I saw. There was more money there than I imagined existed in the whole world. Bundles and bundles of bills, all tied with rubber bands, organized by value. "My God," I whispered. "Where did all this come from?" "Your father isn't just a merchant, Virginia," Mom replied, quickly counting the money. "He lends money to farmers at very high interest rates. When they can't pay, he takes their land." It was dirty money. Money taken from the desperation of other families. In a way, that made it easier to take. We kept all the money in an old bag. Then we started the hardest part, staging the robbery. Mom broke the front door with a crowbar she brought from home. The noise was terrible, but it was necessary. Then we went in and started destroying everything. We threw merchandise on the floor, knocked down shelves, broke glasses. It was as if we were destroying not just the store, but our entire previous life. Each bag of sugar scattered, each broken bottle, was a piece of our prison being undone. "Now the blood," Mom said, taking a small knife. She made a superficial cut on her own finger and dripped a few drops on the door and on the counter. I did the same, following her instructions. It barely hurt at all, but the symbolism was powerful. "Done," she said, looking at the result. "Now let's go home, pack our things." We took only the essentials. 2 changes of clothes each, some important documents, and the money. It all fit in a small suitcase. Before leaving, Mom did one last thing that deeply marked me. She went into the storage room, that cursed place where I had suffered so much, and set fire to a pile of dry straw that was there. "Why?" I asked. "To burn the ghosts," she replied, watching the flames spread, "so that no one else ever suffers in this place." We left the house for the last time as the afternoon was falling. The bus to Washington, D.C. would leave at 7 in the evening. We had enough time to get to the bus station without rushing. On the street, some neighbors waved to us. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Janet. Good afternoon, Virginia." We waved back, normally, as if we were just going shopping in town. No one suspected a thing. On the bus, seated in the back, we finally allowed the reality of what we had done to reach us. We were truly free. After years of torture, humiliation, and fear, we were finally free. Mom held my hand when the bus started moving. "There's no turning back, daughter," she whispered. "From now on, we are different people." I looked out the window and saw Leesburg getting farther away, getting smaller and smaller, until it completely disappeared into the darkness of the night. Along with the town, I also left behind the girl I had been, that frightened, hurt child who learned to hide inside herself to survive. From that moment on, I would be another person, and this new person had plans. Big plans. The bus swayed on the bumpy road when Mom told me the rest of the plan, the part she had saved for the end, the riskiest of all. "Virginia," she whispered, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "We're not simply going to disappear. We're going to die." My heart stopped for a second. "What do you mean, Mom?" "Officially. On paper. We're going to die officially." She explained that she had a distant cousin in Washington, D.C., Sebastian, who worked at the civil registry office. A man who owed some favors to the family and who, for a generous amount, could make 2 death certificates appear in the system. Janet Smith and Virginia Smith, mother and daughter, dead as a result of kidnapping followed by homicide, bodies never found. The coldness with which she said this scared me. Mom had planned our death with the same precision that others plan a trip. And afterward? How are we going to live if we're dead? With new names, daughter, new documents. We're going to become completely different people. We arrived in Washington, D.C. at dawn on Saturday. The city was much larger than Leesburg, full of lights and movement even at that hour. I took the suitcase while Mom discreetly counted the money. We had enough to live well for years if we knew how to save. Cousin Sebastian met us at the bus station. A small man with a graying mustache who nervously looked in all directions as if he expected to be arrested at any moment. "Janet?" he called softly. "Is it really you?" "It's me, cousin. This is my daughter, Virginia." He took us to a cheap inn downtown, to a small room with 2 beds and a window that overlooked a dirty alley. It wasn't luxury, but it was freedom. "What did you do?" Sebastian asked, after hearing our abbreviated version of the story. "Alfred is a dangerous man. If he finds out you're alive, that's why we need to die," Mom replied, placing a wad of money on the table. "How much do you want to make that happen?" Sebastian looked at the money, then at us, then back at the money. "What you're asking? If they find out, I'll go to jail." "No one will find out," Mom assured. "And if they do, we guarantee you won't have any problem." It took 3 days for everything to be ready. 3 days waiting in a stuffy room, going out only to buy food, living in fear that someone would recognize us. Sebastian appeared every day with updates on the process. "I got a friend at the hospital who will certify the deaths," he told us on the 2nd day. "He said that the bodies arrived so disfigured that it was impossible to do recognition, only by the documentation you were carrying." "And the bodies?" I asked. "What bodies?" "You were cremated for sanitary reasons." On Wednesday, Sebastian brought the new documents. Mom was now called Mary Conception Smith. I became Anne Beatrice Smith, orphan sisters who had come from the countryside looking for work. "And our previous story?" I asked, holding my new identity card. "Never existed," Sebastian replied. "Janet and Virginia Smith died last Saturday. You are different people now." It was strange to look at that document and see a name that wasn't mine, but at the same time, it was liberating. Anne Beatrice didn't have a monster father or an abusive brother. Anne Beatrice was a blank page. We moved to a different neighborhood, rented a simple little house with 2 bedrooms and a small yard. Mom got a job at a clothing factory. I enrolled in a public school nearby. "From now on," she said on our first night in the new house, "it's just the 2 of us against the world, and we're going to win." The adaptation wasn't easy. We would wake up in the middle of the night with nightmares, thinking that Dad and Arthur had found us. Any strange noise would leave us in panic. It took months for us to sleep a whole night in peace. At school, I had to invent a story about our family. I told them that our parents had died in a car accident, that we came to Washington, D.C. because we had no one else in the countryside. The teachers treated me with pity, which was better than suspicion. But the hardest thing was dealing with what had happened to me. At 11 years old, I carried traumas that most adults would never face. I had constant nightmares, panic attacks when any man approached me, difficulty concentrating on studies. "You need professional help," Mom said one night, after finding me crying in the bathroom for the 3rd time that week. "What kind of help?" "Head doctor, psychologist." But psychologists were expensive, and we were trying to save as much as possible. So Mom found another solution: the municipal library. "If you can't pay for someone to heal your head," she said, "you'll have to learn to heal yourself." That's how I discovered psychology books. I started by reading simple pamphlets about childhood trauma, then moved on to more complex books about mental development, therapy, medicine. I spent hours in the library reading about my own condition, trying to understand what had happened to me. "The girl reads too much," the librarian, Mrs. Rose, commented to Mom. "Only difficult books, adult stuff." "She's always been smart," Mom replied, "since she was little." What Mrs. Rose didn't know was that those books were saving me. Each page was like a free therapy session. I learned about post-traumatic stress disorder, about how the brain processes trauma, about self-help techniques. It was reading these books that I decided what I wanted to be when I grew up. Not just a doctor, as I had always dreamed, but a child psychiatrist. I wanted to fully understand how a traumatized child's mind works. I wanted to be able to help other girls like me. "Are you sure?" Mom asked when I told her my decision. "Medicine is a difficult, expensive course, and for a girl like you, who comes from where you come from—" "Especially because of that," I replied, "because I know what it's like to suffer and have no one understand you." Mom smiled, that proud smile I hadn't seen in years. "Then we're going to fight for that to happen." And we really fought. Mom worked double shifts at the factory. I studied like an obsessed person. My grades were always the best in the class. The teachers started to notice me, to encourage me. Anne Beatrice has potential for university, the biology teacher said to Mom at a meeting. She should do a preparatory course. Preparatory courses also cost a lot, so I got a job on weekends, selling candy in the central square. The money was little, but it helped. Mom never complained about the tiredness. I never complained about the lack of time to play. They were hard years, but also years of building. Each day that passed, Anne Beatrice became stronger, more determined. Virginia, that frightened girl, was being left behind, buried along with our previous life. At 17, I took the entrance exam for medicine at George Washington University. It was my dream, but also my biggest fear. What if I didn't pass? What if all our sacrifice had been in vain? Regardless of the result, Mom said the night before the results came out, I'm already proud of you, of the woman you've become. The next day, my name was on the list. Anne Beatrice Smith, approved in 15th place for the medical course. I cried so much that Mrs. Rose, from the library, came to hug me. I knew you would make it, girl. From the first day I saw you here, I knew you were special. Mom cried even more than I did. But they were tears of joy, of relief, of victory. We had made it. Against all odds, we had made it. That night, alone at home, Mom told me something that changed everything. You know that money we took from your father? I know. I found out where it came from. I talked to people who knew him in Leesburg. She told me that Dad didn't just lend money to farmers. He financed other things too, things that involved children, other men like Arthur. Our house was just one of the stops in a much larger network of horror. So the money we're using for your education, Mom said, is money he earned destroying other families like ours. I understood the symbolic weight of that. I was using money from my tormentor to become someone who would protect other children. It was poetic justice in its purest form. I don't feel guilty, I said. I feel like it's the right destination for that money. Mom nodded. Me too. And that's how, at 18, I entered medical school carrying not only my dreams, but also a mission. I was going to graduate not just for myself, but for all the children who suffered like I did. I still didn't know all the difficulties that awaited me. I still had no idea how many times I would want to give up, how many nights I would spend studying until dawn, how many times I would fail before I managed to graduate. But I knew one thing. No matter how long it took, no matter how many obstacles appeared, I would succeed. Because I wasn't fighting just for myself. I was fighting for all the Virginias in the world. The first time I failed, I cried for 3 days straight. It was 1972. I was in my second year of medicine, and the subject was anatomy. The professor, Dr. Henry, a stern man with thick glasses, called me after the exam. Ms. Anne Beatrice, he said, leafing through my exam with a look of disapproval. Your theoretical grades are excellent, but in practice, you completely freeze when you need to examine male patients. It was true. Whenever I needed to do a physical examination on men, my hands would shake, my voice would fail, my brain would simply shut down. The professors thought it was shyness of a country girl. They didn't imagine that each touch, each proximity to a male body, transported me back to that cursed storage room. I'll have to fail you, even with your high theoretical grades. Medicine requires confidence in all situations. I left there devastated. Mom was waiting for me at the university gate, as she had done every day since I started the course. So, daughter, how was it? I couldn't answer. I just broke down crying right there, in front of everyone. Mom hugged me without asking questions, took me home, prepared a chamomile tea, and waited for me to calm down to talk. I failed, Mom. I failed because of what they did to me. It was the first time I admitted out loud how my past still controlled me. All those years thinking I had overcome it, that Anne Beatrice was strong enough to leave Virginia behind, and I discovered it wasn't quite like that. Daughter, Mom said, holding my hands. Trauma doesn't disappear overnight. It stays there, waiting for the right moment to surface. But what if I never can? What if every time a male patient needs me, I freeze like this? Then we'll find a way for you not to freeze. Mom found money from where there was none to pay for therapy for me. A psychologist named Dr. Helen, a woman in her 50s with gray hair, a calm voice, and gentle eyes. "Anne," she said in our first session, "tell me what happens when you need to touch a male patient." I tried to explain, but the words came out jumbled, confused. How could I explain that every time I saw a shirtless man, I remembered Arthur? That every time I needed to examine a male abdomen, I heard Dad's voice whispering instructions? It took us 6 months just for me to be able to talk about my past. 6 months lying to Dr. Helen, making up that my parents had died in an accident, that my trauma came from having witnessed their death. "Anne," she said in one session, "you're telling me a story, not your truth. And until we talk about your truth, we won't be able to help you." That's when I broke down and told her everything. Absolutely everything. About Virginia, about the storage room, about Dad and Arthur, about our escape, about our official death. Dr. Helen listened without judging, without showing shock or pity. "You survived the impossible," she said when I finished, "and now you want to help other children. That's not trauma, Anne. That's purpose." The sessions began to make a difference. I learned breathing techniques to control panic, mental exercises to stay in the present when memories returned. Dr. Helen taught me that my triggers weren't weakness. They were warning signs from a brain that had learned to protect itself. "Your fear of men isn't irrational," she explained. "For a girl who lived what you lived, being wary of male figures is survival." I returned to anatomy the following semester. This time, I warned the professor of my difficulty, obviously without telling details. "I have an anxiety problem when I need to examine male patients," I explained. "Can I always start accompanied by a colleague?" Professor Henry, who in the previous semester had seemed like an ogre, showed more understanding than I expected. "Of course, and if you need more time to get used to it, no problem." That's how, step by step, I overcame my fears. First time examining a male patient with a colleague beside me. Then alone, but with the door open. Then with the door closed. Each small victory was celebrated at home with Mom. "Today I managed to auscultate a 60-year-old man without my hands shaking," I would tell her at dinner. "My daughter is a warrior," Mom would reply, proud. But even overcoming the practical difficulties, the course continued to be challenging in other ways. We were only 5 women in a class of 40 students. The professors always made a point of reminding us that medicine was no place for delicate young ladies. "A woman who wants to be a doctor has to be twice as good as a man," the surgery professor said in one class, "because she'll be questioned twice as much." I took that as motivation. I studied more than any colleague, got better grades, knew how to answer questions that left the boys blank. Some colleagues respected me for that. Others hated me. "Anne only does well because the professors feel sorry for her," I heard a colleague comment in the hallway. "Women in medical school are just for show anyway." I didn't respond. I let my grade on the next test answer for me. First place, as usual. In 1975, in my 4th year, something happened that changed my perspective on my vocation. I was doing an internship in pediatrics when an 8-year-old girl arrived with strange symptoms. Unexplained injuries, withdrawn behavior, excessive fear of adults. "She's probably suffering some kind of domestic violence," the nurse commented to me. But how to prove it? I looked at that child and saw myself at 8 years old. The same frightened look, the same posture of someone who expects to be hurt at any moment. "Can I talk to her alone?" I asked the doctor in charge. "You can try. She hasn't spoken to anyone for 3 days." I sat next to the girl's bed, at the same level as her eyes. I didn't try to touch her, didn't try to force conversation. I just stayed there, quiet, showing that it was safe. "Hi," I said after a few minutes. "My name is Anne. And yours?" She looked at me with suspicion, but answered softly, "Carla." "Carla is a pretty name. Do you know why you're here, Carla?" She shook her head. "You're here because someone hurt you, right? And we want to help you." That's when she started to cry. Not the loud cry of a spoiled child, but that silent cry of someone who learned that making noise can be dangerous. "Who hurt you, Carla?" "I can't say," she whispered. "He said if I tell, it will be worse." My heart stopped. It was exactly what Arthur used to tell me. "You know what I'm going to tell you, Carla? Sometimes, when we tell the truth to the right people, we can get rid of those who hurt us." It took 2 hours, but Carla told everything. The stepfather who abused her when her mother went to work. The threats, the emotional blackmail, the constant fear. "You were very brave in telling this," I said, holding her little hand. And now we're going to make sure he never hurts you again. We contacted Child Protective Services, the police department, all the responsible agencies. The stepfather was arrested. Carla went to her maternal grandmother's house. 3 months later, she returned to the hospital for a routine checkup, unrecognizable, smiling, talkative, playful. "Dr. Ann," she shouted when she saw me. "Look how much better I am." At that moment, I understood that I had found my true calling. I didn't just want to be a pediatrician. I wanted to be the doctor that other children would seek when they needed to tell their most painful secrets. I specialized in child abuse. I read everything I could find on the subject, attended conferences, took extra courses. My professors found my interest in such a specific area strange. "Why not pediatric surgery?" my advisor would ask, or pediatric cardiology, more prestigious areas. "Because this is what the world needs," I would answer. "Someone who understands these children." I graduated in 1976 at 25 years old. It was 7 years of a lot of sweat, many tears, 2 failures, countless sleepless nights studying. But it was worth every second. At graduation, Mom was in the front row, crying with pride. When they called my name, Ann Beatrice Smith, graduated in medicine with specialization in pediatrics, she shouted so loud that everyone laughed. "That's my daughter," she yelled. "My doctor!" After the ceremony, alone at home, Mom gave me a present. A small plaque engraved with the words, "Dr. Ann Beatrice Smith, pediatrician, for your first office," she said. "Mom, I don't even know if I'll be able to open an office yet." "You will. And when you do, this plaque will be on the door." I got a job at a public hospital in the pediatric emergency department. The salary was low, the conditions difficult, but it was where I could make the most difference. It was where children like Carla arrived, like I once was. In the first month, I treated 17 cases of suspected abuse, some obvious, others subtle, but all with the same pattern that I learned to recognize: the frightened look, the defensive posture, the fear of adults. "How do you always know when a child is being abused?" a colleague asked me. "You have an incredible instinct for it." It wasn't instinct. It was recognition. A survivor recognizing other survivors. At 30 in 1981, I finally opened my own office. A small space, but welcoming, specially decorated for children to feel safe. The plaque Mom gave me was on the door, exactly as she had predicted. My specialty became known in the city. Other doctors began to refer difficult cases to me, children who wouldn't talk to anyone, complex situations of domestic violence. "Dr. Ann has a special way with these children," they would say. They trust her. Of course they trusted me. I understood what they were going through because I had gone through the same thing. I spoke their language, recognized their fears, knew exactly what words to use to make them feel safe. Each child I helped was a small revenge against Dad and Arthur. Each family I saved was a victory over the system that tried to destroy me. I transformed my pain into purpose, my trauma into a healing tool. And Mom was always there, supporting me, encouraging me, reminding me where we came from and how much we had already achieved. "You've saved more than 1,000 children over these years," she said on my 40th birthday. 1,000 children who won't go through what we went through. We saved them, Mom, the two of us together. Because that's how it really was. Each of my achievements was ours. Each life I transformed carried the strength she gave me when I needed it most.